Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I'm your host. But I'm going to leave this over to the Slasher King.
I don't know about King. Well, okay, so tonight I'm the host. I'm Dustin. We're talking about, oh man, we're already off script. Hooray! I'm your host, Dustin, and I'm joined here by my friends Dave.
Hello.
Katie, Kabuki Jake, and Septum Sins. Oh yeah, introduce yourself, gang.
Hi.
Hello.
Where'd Katie go?
She muted.
Well, Katie's here, I assure you.
Oh, hi. Sorry, I had my microphone muted. Sorry.
I noticed.
I'm here.
And anyway, so this month we're doing, this is our slasher themed month. So, we're having fun again. And so tonight we're doing one of the more unique slashers out there, Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, which is about a documentary crew that follows aspiring killer Leslie Vernon as he plans and executes his big coming out night of mayhem. Although the documentary crew starts really questioning the ethics of what they're doing when the killing actually begins. So it's shot largely as a documentary from the film crew's point of view before switching into a traditionally filmed narrative. And while it can take some getting used to, overall, it's pretty awesome. So let's jump right. So of course we're going to spoil the movie, but I'm going to try to not hit every plot point so that there'll still be some surprises. But anyway, let's start off with first impressions. So the first time I saw this movie was actually last year when Shout Factory released their Blu-ray collector edition of it. So I'd had people recommend it to me before. It's like, I bet you'd really like this. And it was one of those movies where people recommend you stuff all the time. And it's like, yeah, I'll check it out. Because, you get like 100 of those every day. But when the chance to pick this up from Shout came, it was like, all right, we're diving in. And I enjoyed it though. I really enjoyed it the first time. Like it does have a little bit of a slower pacing around the halfway point. But what's there is so good, like you don't care by the time the action starts. Like you forget. So I really love this movie. And let's hear from somebody else on their first impressions. Who wants to go next?
Well, I can go on. This is definitely not my first time seeing it. Back when I was trying to build up my DVD collection, which is started around 2003, and I started trying to build it like at that time, between that time and 2008, which around 2008, 2007, 2008, I think is when I saw it. I had just been trying to buy whatever I could to just pad out my collection, get a lot of films, and I was keeping up with it at the time. I bought this lot of 100 DVDs for $10.
Dang.
So they were random. That was the problem with it. And I had probably about 25 of those. But that one in particular did catch my eye. So I popped that in and I found it hilarious. I'd seen mockumentaries before. I had seen This is Spinal Tap and was it CB4? Is that right?
I believe so.
Yeah, and a couple others. So it was something the genre that I'd actually seen before. And I'd seen a couple of was it Peter Guest, or is that right?
Christopher Guest
films. So again, it's not something I was unused to, but at the same time, seeing something like that, making fun of some of the slasher films, since I had been really getting into horror at that time, it was really fun and really enjoyable. Great first impression.
Okay.
All right.
How about you, Jake?
You got it in that Big Lot? I thought this was one of those random horror bundles you picked up at Food Lion, but I don't know.
I don't think this would have come in a bundle. It's kind of
I
a,
don't know.
it's kind of a.
You'd be,
The
This
quality on this
actually
movie is too
premiered at
high.
South by Southwest. This
Yeah.
film premiered at South by Southwest, so it's
It
more
did?
of an independent film. Yes, it did. In like
Yeah.
2005,
5, 6,
2006.
Right.
something like that.
6 is
yeah,
what
2006. Yeah.
It's a somewhat older movie.
So-
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, I was introduced to it through Brandon. I can't remember if you'd seen it already or and said I needed to see it, but whatever the case, he said I needed to see it, and it's my first impression was fairly positive. I mean, I too am a pretty big fan of mockumentary films. This is Spinal Tap is one of my favorites. Best in Show, I think, is probably the funniest American film ever made. I loved Zelig. There were a bunch of really good ones. And the idea of a mockumentary horror, I like the way that they did it. It does have that weird tonal shift at the end when it changes from a mockumentary to a slasher.
Oh yeah, I want to talk
And that's
about that.
that's kind of an odd. It was kind of a similar feeling to what I had with Adaptation, where it was like you're really watching a different film at the end. But it's overall, I liked it. I love the use of veteran actors who will be very familiar to horror fans. And I mean, even as someone who's not near as deep into horror as y'all are, I got a lot of the references and I appreciated quite a lot of what I saw. And the first part of the film is pretty freaking funny. It's like, so I enjoyed that. It was just like the whole different approach to the whole different viewpoint that you're seeing all this from. It's kind of hilarious and a little disturbing at the same time, but yeah.
Actually, one more thing on that. I watched it back to back with Brutal Massacre. When I did it.
This is the better film.
Oh, another mockumentary for horror, though.
Yeah. Brutal Massacre was an interesting one, but it wasn't. This was the better one. Yeah.
Brutal Massacre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a mockumentary done around the same time, and the only thing that I can remember from that particular film is evidently the female getting shat on for some reason.
The thing that stuck out to me the most was that it starred Brian O'Halloran, Dante from Clerks.
Exactly.
I thought some. Which character did he play again?
Dante from Clerks. He was the director, I believe, in the end Brutal Massacre, though.
I thought he looked really familiar. I just couldn't place it. I know. My thing is, like, I know a lot, but I don't know everyone by name. Like, I've seen that face before, and that's about as far as it goes.
Right.
How about you, Katie?
I really enjoy this film. It was not a first time watch for me. I had seen it before, and really enjoyed it, the times previous. I think it's a great, I like that it's a mockumentary. I think that's fun being in the horror genre. But as a horror fan, I really appreciate all the references in this film. And there's some that it's like, even on this watch, like I didn't pick up on it the first few times. So I think it's one of those where you catch little things every time. And I really liked the perspective too, just that we get to kind of see as if we exist in a universe where Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger are all real dudes that are like a threat to the community, and I just like that it looks at it from that perspective. And really, it's, if I was going to make a slasher movie, this would be like film school, because you basically learn all of the tricks and the tropes and all of the things that happen in a slasher film. They pretty much cover it all. So I appreciate that as a fan of slashers too. I thought it was really cleverly done. It's a very smart smart movie. You know, especially considering that there's so much comedy in it, which I, of course, love horror comedies. So yeah, it pretty much hit on all points for me, except for maybe just one, with there not being quite enough gore in the kills for me. But I have a feeling that might have had something to do with their budget and having Robert Englund on their payroll. So, but yeah, overall, definitely 2 thumbs up for me.
Oh, agreed. All right, Dave, you're up.
Well, I guess I'm probably the only one here that's probably going to have a few negative things to say.
Fuck you.
This wasn't the first time. I actually, as I started watching this, I remembered bits and pieces of it. I do have appreciation for the fact that it did go through, some of the different tropes, like Katie said, and it's because I've seen the movie before, why it wasn't so funny this time around. And to me, the humor hits on dull notes to me, and it didn't make me laugh out loud like it did the first time. So that being said, like Katie said, I think it is kind of a, if you're just starting out in horror, this might be a film to go to, and Ryan Reynolds could have possibly looked at the way that the actor who played Vernon and taken steps of how to go about and be Deadpool doing this. So
Right.
I can see that. Actually.
I can see that in it, but there were moments of boredom that like in between that just while they're waiting and nothing happens and there's no music, and then all of a sudden, okay, what the fuck's going to happen? I mean, it was just very slow in moments, but when it turned into the slasher movie, then it got kind of more entertaining again. So I was not as entertained this time around as I was last time, but I do have an appreciation for what it does portray. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, I think.
See, that was very different from me.
I would disagree with a new to horror person watching this movie, because I feel like, because I know the horror movies that this movie is referencing, I can appreciate it more. I think if I didn't get the references, I wouldn't enjoy the movie as much.
I think, no, I'm not so sure about that, because the first time I saw it, I was much more of a horror newbie than I am now. This was a few years ago that I saw it. And, I mean, I knew the basics when he talked about Mike Myers and Freddy Krueger and all. I mean, I knew that. When Scott Wilson shows up wearing a green and red sweater, I was like, I bet that's a nod to Freddy. There were a couple things I think I got, but there's a lot that I probably picked up on this time that I wouldn't have before, but I still enjoyed it before. But I do think I might have enjoyed it more this time. So it's kind of, there's some truth to that and there's some not. But it could be a good gateway because it's more funny, because it's less gory. It could be a good one for someone who's not really primed for horror for those reasons.
I kept seeing
I can see that.
I kept seeing Stifler in the role.
I did too. The way he talked, I heard Stifler several times.
Was that
Stifler?
No, but it sounded like him.
He really made the film. His performance, I think, Leslie Vernon really made the film what it was. I think without his performance, it wouldn't have worked as well. He was really good.
He was excellent at playing the character, and I actually think it works both ways. I do think that you need to have at least a working definition of slasher horror to enjoy this. at least to the point where you have that loose familiarity that most people have. Even if they haven't seen the movies, they know about Freddy, they know about Jason, they know about these people. They're such big icons. Even people who never watched the movies know about them.
I think at this point in time, this was a time when people were sick of all the same old slasher movies that would have the same tropes, have the same people killed, and no real plot line.
Well, by this time in the mid-aughts, we weren't seeing a lot of slashers anymore.
Yeah, Scream
Slashers
had
had kind of gone away.
Scream
So-
had kind of done it.
Yeah, this
as
is
like the
kind
Happer.
of a little bit of a throwback to that.
Yeah, Scream was actually marketed as the last true slasher film series. Then after that third one, it just really died hard. And then it had been pretty much next to nothing. But I mean, like I said, when I mentioned Brutal Massacre, it came out just a year later. So, you know, these mockumentaries at the time were picking up because there were a lot of them coming out at that time period in the aughts.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was a big thing. But I also disagree also with the boredom part because I get bored pretty easily. I was not bored at all by this film. But again, it depends on who it is or what it is. And the differences in being able to see these particular portrayals, you can actually view this film, that's what I tried to do this time, as something much more serious, as a true horror. And you can actually take this and go and say, you know, this is a horror movie and not a comedy, and make it work if you put your mind right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it does when it has its moment where it flips from being the documentary to being like the slasher movie. Like the
Mhm.
first people you see him kill, like you feel gross. It's like, wait, what?
Mhm.
Like, and I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that's intentional. Like, you feel the disgust of the documentary crew that's in the room. It's like, oh wait, he's really doing this. Like, we thought we were just following some crazy person around.
Well, and I
Well,
think
they
one
are.
of the more interesting
Well,
parts,
technically yes, but you know what I mean.
and I think
Yeah.
one of the more interesting parts for me was when, not too long before, he had said, "Okay, these are the weapons that I've modeled out for the scenery. Okay, here's the axe," and then just not too far later, she picks up the axe, and it's like you knew that was
Like,
going to
I
happen.
forgot.
Yeah.
She probably wasn't thinking at the time, which I was surprised at some of the stupid mistakes that they made.
Some of the kid victims, it's like some of them were almost trying to die. You know what I mean? It's like, no, don't
Well,
go in there.
that's
He's
true.
waiting in there
Most-
for
That's
you.
really
It's like,
cool.
It's
fuck
true
you,
in
and they
most
run in
slasher
there.
films.
Well, no,
That
this
plays
time they
into
have
the
someone
tropes.
tell it. This time they have someone telling them. It's like, no, wait, don't do that. Like, he's actually in there. It's like, open the door,
So-
surprise, there he is.
So it might not be bad to just back up and just say the basic setup that put the whole thing into play here is basically you have this guy who's contacted this film crew and said, "Hey, would you like a firsthand look at what we do?" And and
Well-
so they start that and
and
Well, in the interviews on the Shut Factory Blu-ray,
mhm.
so they were in the interview with the writer director. He was talking about like the idea for this came from he was on the phone with his dad, and his dad was like, "Hey, how are you doing out there?" Because he had just moved to Hollywood to become a screenwriter, and he was like kind of drifting off to bed. It's like sort of having doubts about it's like, oh, can I really do this career?
Mhm.
And as he was drifting off to sleep, he was like, does Michael Myers think about like what he's doing? It's like, does Michael Myers ever have doubts about the job he's chosen? And that's kind of where this came from.
Right.
So I mean,
But
it's done with that framing.
But yeah, one of the things that I did think was hilarious, and again, it could be a little disturbing for some, but it's strongest early on, I guess, is the way that he really does talk about it in terms of his career. He really does talk about it in terms of this is what I'm doing with my life. He has a mentor who's played by the great Scott Wilson, and it's just a great. Him and his wife are just they're so supportive, and they have so much advice. Some of it is
really?
good in
You got the
context.
first Ahab.
Yes.
Now, I was gonna say on the characters of, especially the character of Leslie Vernon.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, and again, I think after a first watch, this is why I disagree that a second watch I think that it actually does help if you're watching it multiple times, because on watching it, if you know what's going on with this character, you can look at the character as he really is, as someone with an antisocial personality, similar to, say, American Psycho, but not as pronounced in a lot of ways, which is kind of funny in a way. I mean, he's unlike the guy in American Psycho who is masquerading as the businessman but looks like a total psycho. This guy actually looks like a normal guy and presents charismatically, but is honest with being a psycho. And but that's the thing, is a person with antisocial personality is charismatic. They are enticing. They can actually manipulate. They don't understand the emotions, but they can manipulate them if they are smart enough. And this is a person who I think, if you want to take it as a serious study, and I think that people who watch this should watch it the first time and enjoy it laugh-wise, but then watch it again and think of it like that in mind, as him as the manipulator, and look at it as a pure slasher film, with that being the goal all along. And it just adds a new depth to the film and a very serious side to it.
Exactly. So what we're referencing here is, so a lot of what he does with the documentary crew is, okay, this is how we pick victims. This is how we sort of stalk them beforehand. These are the criteria for how we decide, who we're going to go after.
And gets them more involved.
Yeah. And he uses all kinds of trade jargon, like flyby and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And the sort of the reveal after a point is that he wanted them too. So from the beginning, he's kind of working them as part of like his victim group.
Right. One of the questions that the movie brings up, and obviously this isn't big time spoiler territory, but one of the questions it brings up is, did he know from the start that Kelly was not Survivor Girl material? Because he definitely played it up that she was, but then at the end you realize that no, he had handpicked Taylor to be the Survivor Girl. So did he know that Kelly was the disappointment she turns out to be? Or
I think they actually answered that in the movie.
I must have missed that.
Yeah, I think he pretty much knew, like, Kelly was a decoy the whole time. His final girl, because you hear him say, like, oh, if I was just picking my final girl now, we'd really be in trouble. Like, he already had his plan well in advance.
Yeah, he wanted the director of the documentary, Taylor.
Yes.
Right. But when you watch the film the first time, that really catches you off guard. It's like, he's going to be, when you find out he's going to be so pissed. and then you get to her moment of realization, and it's like, But I think you're right. It is answered. It's not, they don't hit you over the head with it. It's just kind of cool.
I think I saw it coming, though. I think I did see it coming. I'm trying to think back to the first time I watched it, and I probably did see that coming, that Taylor ends up being the final girl before it even was revealed, but I could see how someone could miss that too.
There's a quick note. So they refer to the final girl as the Survivor Girl. And on the commentary, this is just from memory. I didn't have time to rewatch everything on that disc, which was a fairly well packed, like, complete thing. There was a good amount of content on that. I remember they were talking about, it's like, oh yeah, we tried to coin the term survivor girl, but then somebody else had coined the final girl and that one stuck. So we missed out on that one.
You know, I always thought of it as Survivor Girl. I wonder where I got that from. Maybe it was this movie. I don't know.
I think the final girl
That's
comes
what I
from
always
some
think of.
essay.
No. It's like, well, because wasn't that also the terminology they used in Cabin in the Woods? Wasn't it Survivor Girl? Or am I just totally remembering that wrong?
I don't remember.
I don't remember.
I don't remember either. We should do Cabin in the Woods. Like, there's one of our proposed themes for August. I think would probably fit Cabin in the Woods reasonably well.
That particular one is one that we're long overdue for, but this is a very similar concept to Cabin in the Woods. I mean, again, it's that one that takes a different look at horror from the outside. They could almost exist in the same universe.
They very well might.
Right.
I wonder who. Well, let's see. Lionsgate and what is Anchor Bay?
Don't go in the woods, August.
That rhymes with an A.
It doesn't have to rhyme. It just has to be.
Rolls right off the tongue. Perfect.
Okay. So we covered a few of the characters. What about the Ahab character, the Doc Halloran? What's everyone think of that?
So
Well,
the
first
Ahab.
of all, there's a reference right there, Halloran.
Yeah. The Shining reference. Yeah.
Yes. There was references to a lot of movies that we've covered on this podcast.
There was a fun thing. So the movie opens with a montage where they're explaining, Freddy, Michael, Jason, and giving the background on like all these famous slashers that exist in this universe. And they go to some of the locations, and we see Kane Hodder
living on Elm Street,
living in the nightmare house in 1428 Elm. And it's like, do you have a comment? And he like flips them off and goes inside. And for those who somehow don't know, Kane Hodder plays Jason. So Jason is sort of in this movie. And also...
and Freddy is sort of in this.
Yeah.
Also Victor Crowley to some extent, because Kane Hodder also plays Victor Crowley in... So Adam Green's Hatchet came out around the same time as this, and I think they were both in production at the same time in the same location, or at the very least had like a lot of crossover to the point where... So this is a little bit of a digression, but this comes with two commentaries, like a director commentary and a cast commentary. And I think it's the director commentary that Adam Green is just on there, like as a guest.
He does that a lot.
Yeah, he does. It was really strange because at the time, like Victor Crowley had just come out, so I got to hear him, talk about Victor Crowley because he did it. And then I watched Friday the 13th Part 4 on the Blu-ray set, and him and Joe Lynch did a fan commentary on that. And then after I watched that, like I had put this in for the first time last year in that same period. And guess who's suddenly on the commentary too? It's like, damn, it was like Adam Green was following me around somehow. Like I had no idea he was on those other two things. He was just always there. It's like, what's going on? I'm like looking over my shoulder and shit. And anyway, in Victor Crowley, on the TV set, there's a news story talking about Leslie Vernon's killings, because it takes place, I think, somewhat. Actually, that might have been in Hatchet 3. In one of the Hatchet movies, there is a news story about Leslie Vernon on a TV in the background.
Huh.
So there is a relatively high amount of crossover.
Makes you wonder if there's going to be a Crowley crossover into the new Leslie Vernon movie. Huh.
Well, they've been trying to make that for a while, but who knows if it'll ever actually happen.
IMDb list is in production. I don't know.
Anyway, back to the Ahab. So they introduced the concept of the Ahab, which is the doctor or hunter or whomever they happen to be.
Sort of an arch nemesis.
That's pursuing the slasher. In this case, Leslie Vernon's Ahab is Robert Englund playing his doctor. So we learned that Leslie Vernon has a backstory, something about a child being drowned in an apple orchard or something to that effect. I don't know. It didn't
Thrown
quite
off
make
a
sense to me.
waterfall.
Yeah, threw him off a waterfall after he killed his parents.
Yeah.
But at
Yeah.
any rate, we find out it's like, oh no, our Leslie Vernon his name is actually Leslie. Do you remember what it was?
Mancuso.
Mancuso. He like escaped from Reno, Nevada, and he's just here. Like, and that took me out of it a little bit. It's like, oh, that's less fun.
Yeah. Well, he's
Well,
still crazy.
You know
yeah.
what I really liked that I don't know if I picked it up my first few watches on this film, but I like how he sort of takes on this role. Like, you know, obviously the film really makes us love the Leslie Vernon character, which I think is a throwback to like any of our slashers. I mean, those characters are very beloved, even though they're horrible killers. And so this kind of brings us into that from the back end, you know, where we get to see like, oh, this is why we like this guy. We're following his story and we're really like invested. Yeah, we're very invested. And what I was the most invested in was when he talks about how, like, I believe he's talking to his mentor, and they're talking about like, you make a decision to be the counterbalance to, you know, all the things that are good. Like you need evil as the counterbalance to
bring out the good in the world.
Right. So it's like, you know, we take on this duty to be that evil, to provide that balance. And I was like, ooh, I really like that. I don't know, just that framing of it in that way. It was like that made the most sense to me. It was deep.
No, I was personally like a little bit like, okay, sure. Like, because I used to be somewhat more interested in like philosophy than I am nowadays, and it felt a little bit dubious to me because I was like, are you sure about that?
But I mean, it's true though, like, right? I mean, everything has a balance, and it's the laws of nature.
There is some truth to that, but there's also the feeling of that could be some pretty heavy duty rationalizing there.
Yeah, that was what I was feeling too. But I mean, I do agree with it still all the same though.
But it's like it gives a reason for it. It's like, because who would actually put this much thought into it and go to these lengths to you know, to be a murderer if there wasn't some kind of deeper like meaning behind it? Because the fact is, you have to believe this in this universe where this stuff is actually existing and going on. Like, you know, because it's all actually fictional, but we're in the universe where it's not. Like, something has to make it make sense.
Killing is actually kosher.
Or that at least somebody's going to do a documentary about it, you know?
I mean, this is a universe where Chucky and Jason and and Michael Myers exist, which is it's actually which makes it even funnier that Freddy Krueger exists in the world, and Robert Englund actually plays the person who's supposed to be the representative of good in this particular movie.
So that was one thing I'm kind of curious. I would like to know more about the universe of Leslie Vernon in terms of like how some of the stuff works, because a couple of those guys have overtly obvious supernatural powers, whereas in this it was just like, oh yeah, I know how to control my breathing, you know, I meditate, you know, I work out a lot.
Well, the last scene of the movie, actually, when they do the credit roll, shows a bit of a supernatural type thing at the end. So, or what would be could be interpreted as such. I mean, I doubt that he would have survived that otherwise.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm not sure there's much room for interpretation there. He gets up off the morgue table.
Although, you know, I kind of wonder, what if the way this worked is that, like, you're a regular human and you're a regular person and you do something like this, and if you do it the right way, then something like changes, something about you changes, and you become like, and you gain supernatural powers. You know what I mean?
Well, it definitely makes sense with if you regard it to a lot of the other type of people, like Freddy dying in a fire, technically you could say Michael Myers has died. I mean, a lot of the ways that he's gone down, he should be dead anyway.
Yeah.
Jason definitely had died and come back to life. So, I mean, a lot of that
Well,
makes sense.
Yeah, it's like he. If you look at the end scene, so the end scene is they crush his head in an apple in a cider press and then burn down the building that the cider press is in. And so they wheel him into the autopsy room, and the Talking Heads song "Psycho Killer" plays over the credits, and we're just waiting for him to get back up. And at the end, he gets back up, and so I sort of interpreted that as, okay, he was just some dude who really wanted to be like a who really wanted to be a slasher like Freddy, Michael, Jason, like that was what he wanted.
Yeah.
And he did a good enough job that he made it. Like, he's got powers now. He's changed. And so that's kind of what I read into that.
As powers. I mean, we saw the prep for slowing down the breathing to look dead. He had put the flame retardant cream, that his own concoction, all over his skin. He had prepared himself to live through whatever happened.
Right.
So
they didn't really smush his head all that convincingly, I suppose. Either. I mean, I tend to read themes I like into things sometimes, and so I think I might have done that here. But at the same time, it was like, yay, he did it. He counts now.
Well, it could be it could still be supernatural. Because
that's kind of the feel I got from that. But I mean, you're probably right.
It's left kind of arbitrary, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's more fun to pretend.
It would take a lot of flame retardant. I mean, like a lot of flame retardant to survive what he survived.
Yeah, he was dropping hints about that, about the things that he sort of expected to happen that night. It's like, yeah, I've booby-trapped all the weapons, so they'll break the first time they hit me. Or, like, he just kind of mentions the flame retardant. It's like, wait a minute, why do you need that? So it is somewhat telegraphed that that's how he expected it to shake out.
Right.
Well, I still think that when it got to the end, of course they talk about the reaching for the phallic symbol. See, with
that scene was hilarious.
Robert Englund being there and having the gun, she ignores the fact that he has a gun on him and decides to go for the phallic symbol to take it at the end, which is kind of funny because he'd even mentioned it earlier. It's like, yeah, just name one that they've taken him out with a gun, which they have taken out the horror creatures out with guns in some movies in the past.
Not often.
Scream.
Yeah,
it happens in Scream.
I mean, shoot.
Yeah, but think how many bullets they had to use in that.
So, didn't they take out the Michael Myers originally with a gun?
Shot him 6 times. Shot him in the heart.
Yeah.
But he didn't die.
Well, yeah.
Fucking disappears.
They should use the phallic symbol.
He just gets
So what's happening in that scene is, so during the interviews that they're doing, like, they start talking about the symbolism. It's like, well, what if they go into the closet? The closet is a safe space because that represents the womb, and we're all innocent in the womb. And she's looking at him like, really? So you're pro-life? Or
Yeah.
And then it's like, the phallic symbols are represented by the weapons. So when she picks up the phallic symbol to use as a weapon against me, she is taking my man. And it's like, what?
And then, does anybody remember what the Yonic symbol was?
The gateway.
The apple orchard, where she
birth canal
ends up running in the end. Yeah.
Like
so you're a pro-life and a not a masochist, and a
chauvinist.
Chauvinist. Yes.
And she's just looking at him like, you piece of shit. It's like, I was okay with you killing people. We saw you kill that librarian, and she didn't seem to really care about that. But this is a little too far.
Actually, that's one thing I know. So we've talked about some horror, some actual little hints at different horror movies through actors, like, say, the one who played Jason. Of course, also with the librarian, Zelda Rubinstein, who was the one of the major ones in Poltergeist. Of course, she was in that as the librarian.
I liked her little segment.
Were there any other ones that were there? Because these little cameos are kind of cool.
There were a lot of them. So it's kind of hard to tell. There might have been an Adam Green one, but I don't remember.
Right.
I don't think so.
I don't.
Of course, England is the obvious one. Scott Wilson's had a lot of appearances in horror films, and of course, The Walking Dead, that season that everyone hated, apparently.
That's The Walking
And,
Dead. What's there like?
Wow. Brutal.
Shade.
And then, of course, and he often plays kind of shady. Like he had a recurring role in CSI where he played a very nasty piece of work in that one. So yeah, it was. There was some interesting. I like the fact that they dressed up Scott Wilson in the green and red, and then they dressed up Robert Englund to make him look like Loomis from.
Loomis, yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of sort of switching them around a little bit. But
I just wanted to quickly comment on like when they had that whole discussion scene, like because I've heard the phallic symbol and the yonic symbol, and well, okay, the yonic symbol was new to me, but I've heard a lot of analysis that talks about things like in those terms, and a lot of the times it sounds like just the purest projection / imagination coming from like the person like analyzing whatever it is. It's like, oh, well, I think that, insane theory. And it's like, what? I mean, I see how, okay, you've explained how you could get that from it, but at the same time, what?
Well, and I think a lot of people do that. I mean, we, in a sense, we sort of try to do that about the movies, right? Just looking at things and trying to overanalyze it. And I think that maybe was a play on that a little bit.
Exactly.
Like,
that's why
let's get all deep into these,
That's why I appreciated it, because sometimes it feels like their conclusions are much, much more of a stretch. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm used to wild conversations about random philosophical discussions. I mean, Kevin Smith movies often have a lot of those.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just thinking of like the South Park episode where Cartman is like just showing like random pictures to the class, and he's like, if you look here at the use of light and dark, the tones remind one of death. Like, what? He's just like completely making it up as he goes. But I just wanted to get that out there about that scene. So, well, moving on. So, what do you think about the effects? Because we've kind of been talking about plot and characters for a while.
Well, that was kind of my low point. I think they probably, I'm guessing, didn't have the budget for like great effects. But I think my favorite one by far was the post hole digger kill. Like, it's one of the only ones you really see. It's the only one with like any amount of gore, really.
Yeah.
I was a little disappointed.
When I describe this movie to people, so I kind of use that. I use part of that scene in the description. It's like, okay, so the documentary crew follows him around. And so they're going around. It's like, okay, so I've nailed these windows shut, so they can't get out there. I did leave one open, but that one's booby trapped. So I'm going to come out here and I'm going to kill this guy with the post digger. And then he actually, follows through on it. And the thing with the post digger, it was like, when I saw that, I was like, he's doing it. And then I saw the effect and it's like, ooh, that's a really fake looking heart.
Still, you had to like that where he's placing the heart in the person's hand. That's still a fun scene.
It was a nice touch. It's just kind of like, ooh, I think I know where I can buy one of those.
Actually, you reminded me of one of my favorite moments in terms of the just the humor and the observant, the sometimes observant nature there is like he says, I'd nail all the windows shut. And then the tailor's just like, well, why doesn't someone just bust the window open? And he's like, you'd think they would, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that was great. Yeah. They never do that.
But yeah, you would. You would think like that.
When the one camera when she escaped from the house down the slide, I was like, why didn't you go back and kick the slide? or take the slide
That
out.
was in the barn, and that's like for transporting the hay into the second level of the barn. You can't just pick that.
Yeah, it looked pretty sturdy.
Yeah.
It's like a 4
At
foot
least
thick wood
try.
ramp.
I would have at least tried.
I mean,
Those are
like,
like really heavy, like steel, like
Ugh.
ramps.
the Hulk could have
Yeah.
maybe done it, but
Yeah.
probably nobody else.
Yeah, right.
It looked like one of those slides where you would have had it in your backyard and you would
Oh no. It's I don't know the proper name for it, but it's like in a barn used for
Grain
transporting like
elevator or some
yeah,
shit.
yeah,
something
something like that.
myself, well, why didn't she like try to kick that slide out? So
Because it's not a slide.
Because it's sheet metal and it wouldn't have worked. Like, try to kick your house down, but you can't.
Right. Like, why didn't she just push the car home?
But in terms of like the other effects, like I think the best effects in the movie were his costume. Like his mask is a little minimalist, but like the aging like on his costume looked great.
I mean,
like that
aren't
was kind
all
of
the
my
masks of the slashers minimalist?
well.
Besides
This one
Freddy,
was
'cause his
Yeah.
action mask.
this one was a little different. It was just
a dirty redneck.
well, it was just like a face. It was like a face. It was like the
Yeah.
alien gray kind of mask.
I don't know. It was kind of. It looked almost doll-like in
Exactly.
a way that made it really creepy.
Yeah, I think the mask. I think it actually did work for him, and the concept did work well.
Mm-hmm.
It is interesting that he didn't really don the mask for the actual murder spree until after he killed. After he did his first few kills. It wasn't until after he had said, "Okay, you guys need to leave," before he really did it, which actually, in a sense, was another bit of foreshadowing, really, if you think about it, because he was looking at it as it's not started yet until I get to that point where I know that you can't let this get to that point where you can leave it alone.
And yet he's also prepared for just in case they decided to stay, too.
Well, he had been counting on them
Oh,
staying.
he counted on it, yeah.
As like part of his plan, because he told them most of his plan. He didn't tell them all of the plan. And that added to sort of the meta commentary of this, where the documentary crew is trying to help the kids. It's like, okay, so he's down in the basement and he's going to kill that guy and she's going to run up here. So here's what we need to do instead of, what Leslie is expecting you to do.
And the people were like, well, how long have you been following us? Instead of getting
like, don't worry about it. Although he was like, even if he hadn't planned for it, though, she says all this stuff in front of the window when he's standing right there. So it's like, he can probably hear you.
I mean, I think it's really interesting to watch the movie. And for any of you out there listening who have seen this movie, to watch it again with that in mind. Just keep it in mind, whether you believe it or not, that he's planning on them being involved the entire time with the main reporter as the survivor girl. And it really does change your outlook on the movie. And you can see it all like fall right into place as it goes in.
Yeah, and there's also that scene where it's like, no survivors, right? And the camera guy runs off. It's like, hey, I'm getting away. Come get me. And there's kind of a moment where it's like, dude, it's me. Remember? Like, because, they were like high-fiving each other and like being like friendly, like not 10 minutes earlier. And like Leslie like takes his mask off before breaking the guy's neck. And that was, I don't know, that had something to it. It's like a return to like the reality of the violence of what's really happening.
So one thing I did think was interesting is that when the one guy, because there were three of them, and 2 out of the 3 survive. And the one who is basically like, I love her, you got to go through me first. And of course,
that was maybe my favorite scene.
When the one,
you have to go for me, push, knocked out. And it's like, oh, all right.
And I wonder, did he do that actually out of any type of sympathy for his survivor girl? Like, here's something for you to live for. Or was it more of a you're not important, get out of my way type moment? Now, if he's truly an antisocial personality, of course it's going to be you're in my way, get out of the way in the moment. But if he actually did have some type of feeling, then that could be shown there.
That sort of reminds me of a moment in if anybody has seen like the old Justice League cartoon, there's an episode where Lex Luthor and Brainiac fuse into a godlike being, and he's kicked the shit out of everybody else, and the only one left to fight him is the Flash. And I think Luthor Brainiac's line is like, "What are you gonna do to me?" And it makes me think of that whenever I see a scene like that, and it's like, you'll have to get through me, and it's like, okay, whap. Like, what are you gonna do? You got nothing. So that was how I interpreted that, and I laughed pretty hard at that.
But it would just have been as easy for him to just slash his throat or kill him. I mean, he would have had just as minimal an effort to kill him, and if his goal was to kill everybody, that is that would have been an easy thing for him to do.
Even though he just hit him, even though he just pushed him, he pushes him into that beam pretty hard. Like I think I heard a crunch, and he just like dropped like a sack of bricks. And it's like, oh, that might have got him. So that still worked for me in that sense with that scene. But anyway, I guess wrapping special effects, their blood looked pretty fake. That was, I think, my last effects comment.
There wasn't even a lot of blood, even.
Yeah, there was very little blood, and what was there, it was a little bright, wasn't it?
Kinda.
Yeah. Anyway, so moving on to music. So I don't remember a whole lot of music in this, except for that one Talking Heads song, "Psycho Killer," over the credits. Which I had never heard that song before. I had never actually heard the Talking Heads before. We were talking about this in like the pre-show.
I find that very strange.
Me too.
I read about them in the American Psycho novel, but I didn't know they were talking about a band. So whenever Talking Heads was mentioned in that novel, I thought they were talking about like actual Talking Heads, like a weird conceptual thing. That novel does that a lot. And so it's like, oh, Talking Heads is a band? And it's like... listening to Psycho Killer like play over the credits, like it was like the perfect ending for this movie. And I'm slightly obsessed with that song. I listen to it a lot.
Also, there was another music horror reference. I don't know if you guys caught it during the when Leslie's putting on his makeup and stuff. Did you guys catch the music from The Shining, from the end of The Shining?
Oh, I missed that.
I think it sounded familiar, but I didn't really think about it. But I did see that listed on IMDb. But yeah, it was the end credits theme, right? The one that plays when you see the picture of Jack in the
in the ice and in the snow.
Yeah.
See, I didn't catch that. No, that's something definitely to look for in the next rewatch.
Yeah, because I mean, it did have score bits like here and there, but they just didn't jump out at me like this time.
Well, this is like an old pop recording. Ray Noble and his orchestra, "Moonlight with the Stars and You." It's like an old big band sort of song.
Big band.
Yeah. But yeah, like you said, there probably were some music cues that played, but nothing obvious. Like, there was they didn't put like a snatch of Halloween or anything like that in there that I caught. But yeah,
I thought
they probably blew the budget between Psycho Killer and Robert Englund. They probably
that might have done it. I thought I remembered them talking about in the commentary how Psycho Killer was like really, really expensive.
Licensing music is expensive. I hear this like it's one thing that's very annoying to collectors because if they use a piece of music that they can't keep the rights to, it makes it very hard for it to ever get a good release.
Sometimes I wonder if that's why the budgets for some like big Hollywood blockbusters are so high, because a lot of them will have like big songs in them. Like
Oh yeah.
I saw Spider-Man Far From
yeah.
Home this morning, and
yeah.
I'm going to spoil one joke. It's a throwaway, so
Okay.
it won't be too bad. So they start playing back. So they start playing Back in Black for Spider-Man, for a triumphant moment for Spider-Man, and he's like, "Oh, I love Led Zeppelin."
They keep harping on how he's kind of a youngin', don't they?
Yeah, I guess he's like 16 or whatever. Or I thought he was like 14. Like he's very young. But I mean that movie was good, but that's a whole other thing. Anyway, so I guess we're kind of closing up here. So let's jump into favorites, which I think we've talked about a lot of our favorites, but let's try and single some stuff out. I'm still trying to think of mine a little bit. So how about who wants to go first?
I actually like that scene in the movie where they're talking about the pet turtles. Kind of a
Totally
Rocky
forgot about
reference in
that.
it, but the idea that he says in the end, I only have pets that I can eat, and he also was also motioning to like plants that he has around the house, and I thought that was just there's just something about that always brings a laugh, which is even when I was trying to watch it as serious, I still had a chuckle at that.
I was kind of what the fuck at that, because I mean I like turtles. I've had pet turtles, and it's like, oh okay, see, he's okay. Wait, what?
And before that, he has a comment of, well, he just won't die. It's like, not a good way to keep your pets. Yeah.
What about you, Jake?
Well, like I said, there are a lot of lines that I really love, like that comment about the windows and, things like that. As far as an actual scene, probably my favorite one is that early scene with his mentor and his mentor's wife, and then where they're just talking about the business and talking about all the newer people and how it was done in the old days, and just just the whole thing. It would have not been out of place if they were talking about pretty much anything, but they're just talking about
fly fishing or something.
Did you guys catch that his mentor, what's the guy's name, Eugene or something, his wife, it sounds like, was one of his survivor girls?
Actually at the end of that, it sounded like his wife might have been the killer like before him.
Well, what she says, she makes a comment about that she caught him or something like that. But I think they were referencing, something to do with her being a final girl. That's kind of what I got out of it.
I didn't quite catch that, although I did think, wow, there's an age difference there.
Yeah.
But one thing that I do not get from the movie, but I've seen it listed in the commentary on this, that supposedly Eugene was supposed to be sort of a riff on an older version of the Killer for Black Christmas.
That's what I heard too.
And I'm like, well, that would make sense in that sense if you had like that she could be a survivor girl. I had not even thought of that, but that's a fun idea. But that was sort of, I guess, a reference that they kind of either they backed off from, or they left something on the cutting room floor, or they just kind of threw it in there and forgot about making sure anyone would get it. I don't know, but it's not an obvious reference, but it's interesting to think of.
Well, the line I remember from that is they were talking about the mentor and Eugene and his wife were talking about that. About chases, and at some point she goes, it's like, well, I caught you, were fast, I still caught you though, and he laughed and I was like, oh wait, was she chasing him? So that was kind of my take on that scene. It's like, wait, what?
I must have missed that line.
I took it as he was chasing her, but she caught him, which
Okay.
that's the joke.
And that
That's how I
also,
took it.
if she was a survivor girl, it makes much more sense her reaction at the beginning, where he's in the sensory deprivation tank, and she says, "I just been too busy. I haven't gotten out there." And then they come out, "Wait, he's been in here 3 days."
Yeah.
Yeah. But,
Oh, I wanted to also comment when you guys were talking about the turtles. Did anybody catch the names of the turtles? Church and Zoe
right.
from Pet Cemetery. And then
Right.
also part of the Leslie Vernon story is that his body was eaten by the turtles in the river or whatever.
Yeah, that was that was a
Right.
weird one. I mean, first of all, those were the wrong kind of turtles for that. Second of all,
Well, I don't know that those were the turtles that ate him, but that just
Right.
ties in with his whole story.
I mean, I heard that, and knowing something about turtles, I was like, wait, what? No. Well, maybe, yeah. I mean, they are scavengers. Like, I was very not sure how to feel about that, like as a herpetologist. Like,
Well, at
I
least no
think I had-
turtles were harmed in the
well,
making of this film.
true. I think I gave them a mulligan on the. It's like he was eaten by turtles. And it's like, well, whatever, fine. But was that your favorite, Katie? Or
I don't know. I mean, I kind of said a little bit of a favorite earlier that I liked, sort of the attitude about being the counterbalance or whatever. But overall, like, if I could think of a favorite scene or a favorite part, I guess I just enjoy in general, like, all of the prep work that he does for this evening, just all the detail that goes into mapping everything out, because these are all questions that we've all probably had at one time or another watching a slasher film. Like, why wouldn't you just do this? Or, of course you jump into the tree and all the branches break. And it's like, yeah, because he pre-cut them ahead of time. Like, he's not really supernatural and has all these powers. He just has to do a lot of cardio, and he has to figure out how to, like, walk fast when everybody else is running, and all
Like,
that
right.
kind of stuff.
when you're not looking, I'm running. I'm
Right.
Mhm.
I think my favorite aspect of the movie was just how that was presented, and just what a great job the actor did portraying that attitude around, like, the hard work that he's putting into this. And then also to where he sort of has his little breakdown moment, and he's like, I'm so happy, like everything's coming to fruition, and he just
Right.
has a moment there with I forgot her name now, Taylor. Yeah, and they just have like a moment there, right as he's done getting everything set up, and it just really, like, it humanizes the character, and it's a fun way to look at it, because I try to relate always with the villain, and I especially, like, I relate to Leatherface is probably the horror movie villain that I relate to the most. And so, like, when I developed my Leatherface burlesque number, I really had to decide, like, well, how do I want, what aspects about this character do I want to portray, and, like, how do I want to humanize this character in my performance? And this is just a really fun way to see a slasher being humanized, because we really don't get a whole hell of a lot of that, in terms of Jason and Michael Myers and Freddy and stuff. So it was fun to kind of see the other side. How does he get there? The imagining of that, obviously, in this particular storytelling aspect.
I think the idea that the serial killer or the slasher killer is more humanizing is something that isn't really shown that much per se, because we always see the killer doing the killing. Yeah, and
We get a little bit of that with Jason,
correct.
which is kind of like Leslie Vernon's story is loosely based on kind of like a Jason Voorhees story as well. You get a little bit of that.
And I guess if I had to choose a favorite scene, I think, like I said earlier, where you get the one scene where he's showing off all the weapons that he'd already fucked up, ahead of time, and he's like, they always go for the stick. The stick is, and that's when you get kind of a sexual reference in there. But later,
He's reaching for my cock. What? I think that's the actual line, isn't it? I
but
said
later,
like,
it's her, the filmmaker, that picks up the same weapon that he was for talking about the weapon that he thinks that the victim will always choose first, and that's
He knows his stuff.
yep.
Mm-hmm.
So that right there was a smart to me. I guess that was my favorite scene. I was like, oh, she did it. So.
Well,
But
also, he may have been kind of that part of that manipulation in play there. He showed it to her, and that kind of imprinted on her brain, and so she probably subconsciously reached for it.
yeah,
I don't know.
and then the thing of the apple press at the end. Like,
Yeah.
see, showing her the apple press, and it's like, yeah, it's crushing apples. There's some symbolism in there. And it's like, oh, come on. I
Well,
think I
he even
actually
says
said,
it.
I actually said,
Even
oh, come on.
well, he
It's
even
so on the
says it. She's
nose.
like, "Well, what are you going to do with that?" And he says something like, "Well, somebody's going to get, really hurt, have a really bad night, or something like that." I forget exactly what he says about it, but he
Well, I think
references that's where someone's going to die in that press. So
I
it's a
think
foreshadow.
before that, she says, "What happens?" And he's like, "Juice comes out."
I did not make that particular connection. God damn it.
Good times.
I'm like dazed now. Well, as for me, my mind just kind of went blank with Eldritch Horror. So I'm trying to remember what my favorite scene was, and I don't know if I have a particular favorite. I think it probably is that montage where he's walking them through the house and showing them it's like, okay, this is what I did, so this is how it's going to go down. And like during that, we get kind of flashes of like what's about to happen too, and then we see those scenes play out. Of course, like once the actual mayhem starts. And so I think that's maybe my favorite scene, just the planning, kind of like what Katie said.
Does anyone want to see an actual movie that follows it from the outside, just to as a regular slasher movie would, just to see how it plays out from the outside?
I really wish we had gotten something like that. So if you guys are, I'm sure a lot of our audience and you are familiar with Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Oh yeah.
So an extra on that Blu-ray is Tucker and Dale Are Evil, which it's an alternate cut with a couple of alternate scenes, which is just the story from the kids' point of view, where it's just all Tucker and Dale being overtly evil. I feel like we'd get something kind of like that, except more serious. Like I want to see more Leslie Vernon stuff, and that'd be a fun direction, I think, to take it in.
Oh yeah, it'd be great extra if anything.
It was a little surprising they didn't do something like that, but so apparently there's been a sequel that they're trying to get off the ground for a while.
There is a comic, I think.
I
Like a prequel comic or something.
I did look into that. It's like a Kickstarter only thing, and the first issue is sold out. So there's like no way to actually read the entire thing. At least there wasn't when I checked a year ago, which was really disappointing, frankly. At least to me. I mean, maybe they printed more. Like I haven't checked yet, but I'm going to when we're done. So,
All right.
Anybody have any additional thoughts as I have to take a quick break from the mic?
Well,
I don't know. I think we really covered quite a bit. I'm trying to think if there was anything I had that. I don't. We covered a lot. I think we did it justice quite well.
Yeah.
I guess there is one kind of fun, just sort of personal thing. So Leslie Vernon's weapon is like this little hand scythe. And what I like to do with my collecting is if I can get a hold of them, I like to have like different killer weapons, especially ones that are kind of weird or unique.
Mm-hmm.
And many years ago, I was at some flea market and I found a hand scythe and I was like, oh, this is kind of neat. And I bought it. This is, mind you, like 6 years before I've seen this movie. And so I've had this thing the entire time. And so we see his weapon and it's like, oh, okay. And I'm going onto trickortreatstudios.com to like look for like the prop weapon. And I'm like, wait a minute. And I just like walk over to the window where I have this thing and just pick it up and put it in a different spot. And it's like, well, that was easy. So that was just kind of a fun me story. I sort of want to get like the Leslie Vernon mask too, but like a good one.
I took a picture in one down in Chicago. We were at a costume shop and they had one, and I'm like, I need to try that on and take a picture. So I have it on my Facebook somewhere. I'll have to dig it up.
I did get a Scream mask. So I was trying to do kind of slasher month in June, and I watched the entire Scream series in about a week. And I was at the Milwaukee Comic Con this weekend, and I got a Ghostface mask there. So, but yeah, there's a lot to look forward to this month with just all the different slashers that are out there. Like, there are a few titles that I really hope we get to cover. Not necessarily just like the big major titles, but more fun cuts too. I especially want to do Intruder. But anyway, if nobody else has anything they want to add,
there's just one more thing I wanted to say. There's a commercial that from time to time was on that kind of reminded me of all this, where they were like, "Oh, let's go over here, hide behind the trees with the chainsaws." I don't know if anyone remembers that, but it kind of reminded me of like,
let's it's like, why don't we go for the car? No, let's go over here. Let's hide behind the wall of chainsaws.
Yeah.
Like,
it just kind of reminded me of the Leslie Vernon stuff.
We can duck and cover.
Yeah.
Burned to cinders. But, anyway, so I'm going to hand off the hosting duties here. But first, here's who I am. I'm Dustin, also known as the Crypt of Horrors on Twitter and DHR Hunter on Instagram. So I'm a horror collector living in Milwaukee while I go to grad school at UW. And I just love collecting and talking about horror. And so you can find me causing trouble on Twitter or whatever I'm doing. It kind of depends on my mood. And you can see what I post from my horror collection on Instagram, as well as on my own channel here on YouTube, The Crypt of Horrors, which I'm working very hard to get more uploads on. They're sort of ready to go. I just need to figure out editing. So, because doing this is fun, but turns out I'm bad at production. So, yeah, check my stuff out and take it away, whoever wants to go next. So I'm saying goodnight because I got to get going.
Okay.
All right. I can go next. I'm Katie Cadaver, horror artist from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Let's see. What do I have coming up? Well, first of all, you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Patreon. And you can see me at Days of the Dead Indianapolis coming up this weekend. I will be the co-host for the FX Makeup Challenge. That is happening at 4:30. So come and see me there. I will also be at Summerfest on Sunday night, July 7th with Rat Bat Spider. They are headlining the Rebel stage at 8 p.m., closing out Summerfest in Milwaukee. So if you're in Milwaukee Sunday night and want to go to Summerfest, come and see Rat Bat Spider. Other than that, I don't really have any big things coming up for July. I'm going to try to take it a little easy. Hopefully make it on for another slasher episode because I do love my slasher movies and love to talk about them. So I will hopefully be back on for another one soon.
Actually, since I also will need to go pretty soon, go ahead. I'm known as Septum Sen from Septum Sen versus the World. We are a YouTube channel that caters to the physical media crowd, be it video games, movies, books, or other types of physical media. And we have numerous videos on reviews for films. We talk about weekly, we do pickup videos, and we go for what is new to DVD and Blu-ray releases. So if you want to keep up with what's coming out, we are the channel to do. And of course, we have our top 10s. Recently, we did a top 10 grouping about anime that had influenced us. This was our part 2 of that series. And of course, we have an upcoming one, which will be coming out next week, where we will talk about Criterion movies due to the twice a year Criterion sale at Barnes & Noble. With them changing hands, this might be the last Criterion sale that they do at Barnes & Noble. We never know. So it's worth having another Criterion shot. And hopefully you all will enjoy and check out our channel.
All right. And I'm Kotobuki Jake, and I frequently guest on said channel. And incidentally, the Criterion list he's talking about will be the films that should get a release. We did one once before, and it was pretty fun, but it was kind of a long haul, but I would still recommend looking at that. I, of course, am also a movie and anime and television collector, fan, what have you. And I do have my own channel, Kotobuki Jake, which is a nature-themed channel about nature in the natural world. I have a Hub Pages account, which is not really updated, but there's some interesting stuff there. And that'll do for me this week. Nothing else big to report this go around.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my name is David Streggy. I am one of the hosts for Inside Movies Galore. I host this with many of you, and I normally on this channel also do some interviews, but I've been putting them out on a different format, and we'll be having a ton of things out on Spotify, going back maybe about 2 years. So definitely keep a lookout for those. I have 2 more interviews that'll probably show up tomorrow. One with Patrick Ray, a director of Nailbiter, and other films, and Tim Ritter, the Truth or Dare director. So definitely keep a lookout. The original Truth or Dare, not the Hollywood Truth or Dare. So in any case, definitely keep a lookout for those. And like we said, we're continuing the slasher month. Next week we will be having let's take a look here. Next week we will be doing Psycho, so keep a lookout for
good times.
That film, and our discussions will continue. So keep a lookout for those. I have a good week set up for interviews next week. Many of them will not be live, but they will be going up onto the channel that we have up on Spotify, Radio Public, and so on and so forth. So check our podcast out, if you will. But also keep an eye on this channel too. We're not done here. So in any case, stay tuned, have fun, watch films, like, share, and subscribe, and have a good evening. And don't watch too many slasher films.
No such thing.
Surprise! Slash them all!
Oh no!